To make it to Brazil. It means a lot to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hang on. Yeah, there we are. That one's working. And in fact, the voice that's on the PA at the moment is that of Canadian Jim Martin, who is the person that I worked with at the very first Petit Le Mans back in 1998. There was no American Le Mans series then. There was a single race, and it's one of those stories, isn't it, where the phone call comes and there's an American voice on the end of the line. Is that John Hindhaugh from Radio Le Mans? Yes. Would you like to come to Atlanta in October and do a little race? We don't know what it's going to lead to yet. Would you be interested? I'll call you back. And the reason I said that was I honestly thought it was one of my friends having a joke at my expense. So got the phone number, rang back the chap called Joe Widenthorpe, who worked for Dr. Don Panos. Joe was a character himself. He'd been among other things, the tour manager for the Beatles on their very first American tour. Was a broadcast man through and through, but a radio man as well. And he and I didn't really get on to start with, but we formed a very strong friendship after that. But long story short, we came out with about a dozen Brits to Petit Le Mans 1998 for just that one race, of course. And after that, the American Le Mans series started, and the rest is history. There's actually fabulous to hear Jim Martin on the PA here behind me, and Jim will be at Petit Le Mans. And it was Jim actually who called the start of that very first race. We'd never worked together before. And much the same as the first time that I worked with Jeremy, the very first time we worked together with Jim and also with Jeremy, it was like I'd worked with these guys forever and a day. And I'm very much indebted to the swap mics. I'm very much indebted to Jim Martin, who was the broadcast professional, and I was still pretty much a rookie, despite my Radio Le Mans experience, and also to Jeremy latterly for keeping me on the straight and narrow and not letting me wander off too much. It's been a fabulous 15 years, I think you'll agree, and the legacy of Dr. Don Panos, and let's make no bones about it, it is a legacy, is that the face of international sports car racing was changed forever by that one race in 1998, and subsequently, of course, by what followed it. But that race in 1998 was remarkable. You know, I think we ran 6.5 or 7 hours before we got the first full course caution. We had something over 40 cars there, and just to show you how times have changed, it was a Ferrari 333 SP that won the race, and I thought that was that. You know, end of the race, really enjoyed it. First time to America, first experience of US culture, of US racing. It was mega.
Well, that your first trip to the US?
Yes, absolutely. And I stayed over for 3 weeks afterwards. The canny Brit in me, figuring that if somebody was prepared to pay my fare out to the States, I better make the most of it because I might never come back. And actually, I hooked up with Martin Haven, another one of our broadcast colleagues, down at Homestead for a world sports car race where it would have been easier to introduce the crowd to the drivers rather than the other way around. And then the following weekend we went out to Laguna Seca for the final round of, in fact, what was the final round ever of that championship. And Laguna Seca, my first trip to Mazda Race with Laguna Seca, it would have been in sort of late October, and it snowed, and there was a frost, and then it rained heaven hardest. And the major remembrance I have of that is for the American sports car race on the Saturday, where the BMWs in Europe were running the V12, of course, the V12 LMR, which would become an important part of the American Le Mans series as well, but it was a V8 that ran over here. I remember watching in the pouring rain at Laguna Seca, this American guy who I'd never heard of called Bill Oberlin, starting from the back of the field in a V8 BMW prototype, and driving through the field and pretty much lapping the field before he handed the car over and got out and got into a GT car and drove the rest of the race in the GT car. And I thought, I like this type of racing, I like the way everybody just gets on with it. And then after that I went home, assuming that I wouldn't come back, having had 3 weeks, nearly a month in the States. And then of course we started the American Le Mans series in '99, and I think I've missed about half a dozen races in that time, and this is my last one. And ironically, of course, it's my first trip to VIR because I wasn't here last year because of the crash. So it's kind of interesting that my first and last races in the States have been first times at something or other. So I'm looking forward to the race of the weekend. I think it'll be an interesting one. The track, I got out to do some driving yesterday. The track looks difficult, it looks technical, but I think it'll provide, like it did last year, Jeremy, a pretty exciting race.
I think it's going to be a great race this afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, I should say. The whole point of this thing, from my perspective, is to get you guys to ask the questions of our guests here. So, who's got the first question for John Hancock while we're waiting for the other drivers to come along? First of all, Jim. Is she? Great, fantastic. Yeah, let's do that. But in the meantime, think up your questions here. First of all, let's welcome in our first guest this afternoon. Connie Niall is the president and CEO of the VIR International Company.
CEO of VIR.
It's a fabulous racetrack. You've spent a lot of your time here over the years. It's become one of the premier road courses in North America. I think first of all, let's just say your perspective on the fact that this track, there was a lot of competition to be on the schedule for 2014 with the new Tuesday United Sports Car Series. So your sense of satisfaction and pride that VIR is on the schedule for next year.
There. As I tell people, if they cut me, I'd leave VIR green. I mean, I love this place, and I love all y'all for coming, and I think that's why we got a race, is because our fans love us the most.
I think you're absolutely right. No arguments there, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So, as I guess, we'll get our guests to answer one question each, but in the meantime, I want you all please to be thinking your own questions for our guests here this afternoon. Let's welcome now from Holland, driver number 81, driving for the British Motors PC car in tomorrow's American Le Mans race, Linda van der Zande. Linda had his first pole position last time and spoke to the country a couple of weeks ago. He's come up through the ranks in Europe, making single field racing, and the last couple of years lately we've had the opportunity to drive in the sports cars. I'll just tell us a little bit about how different sports car racing is over here to the open wheel ranks in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is really that in a Formula car it's all sprint racing, and all the sports car series here and also in Europe are the long distance racing. So I think the biggest difference is that it's a sprint race in Europe on the Formula cars, and here you have to do it with two drivers, longer distance, think about strategy, think about tires, managing the tires, managing how long a stint can be, also managing how it is with the safety cars, because in Europe, for example, there are a lot less safety cars. They tend to get the car out of the way and keep the race going, where in America, like I'm getting used to now here, it's really that they put the safety car out whenever something happens on the track, even little things. So and that makes the racing very interesting here, in my opinion, because when the safety car is out, the pack comes together and it's like a new start of the race. So that's the main difference.
Well, who's got some questions here for our guests? Don't be shy. Yeah, great. I've never had this before. Any questions, everybody? Yeah, here we are. Great. Just, who you are in your question, please?
I'm Robert. I just have a question. In the challenge car, they're all pretty much spec and similar. How much more can you get out of the car with tuning the suspension or whatever?
Do you mean with the different suspension, or what do you mean, like if you start developing the car?
I'm saying they're all pretty much the same in the front side challenge, correct? What do you have to do to get more out of the car at the racing end of it, not really the driving end?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all down to the driver, isn't it, Randy? That's the first thing. Great question, thank you.
So you really mean the development of the car, yeah? The development of the car. I mean, we are driving in a one-spec car, like you say, the PC cars. So it's a given car where it's within the rules and you cannot really develop on the car just by changing the setup. For example, the springs we can change, the roll bars, we can change the cambers, the caster, that kind of standard things that you can do on all cars, Formula cars, sports cars, everything. if you're in a P2 car, the P2 cars it's possible to develop the car, and then you start working on the aero, for example the wings, the floor under the car, the wings on top of the car, but also the flow going through the radiators, and that kind of aero spec things that you can change and develop on is what the teams are looking for. But on our car, the PC car, it's not possible at all. We're not allowed to change anything on the aero more than changing the rear wing a little bit.
I can't believe there was going to be questions. Hey, we are the front row. I was going to say, is everybody from Virginia shy, or what's this all about? Thanks very much.
I'm Nita. I'm very interested in what you are thinking as you are in the race. For example, when you approach the exit, are you on what I would call automatic pilot and not trying to think of anything? Or are you thinking about a strategy? What kind of thoughts do you have on the areas of the track?
Well, the next time I'm approaching to the S's, I will be thinking of you, of course. But no, I think, you know, the thing is, I didn't do a lot of laps today and yesterday because we broke down the car yesterday with a little problem, and now again with an oil problem. So we didn't do a lot, and it's the first time I approached the S's in the last lap, and I did it flat. The first time doing a corner flat, like the S's or a high-speed corner, it's something with this. Well, you have to squeeze your, you know, and do it in one time. So. It's what you think about is just that you know that it's possible, that you put the foot down and you keep the foot down. That's the only thing what you're focusing on. And of course to get the line right. So for example here in the S's it's all about staying as much to the left, staying as much to the right, so you can do also the last one flat. So it's more a strategy of driving where you're looking at and what you're thinking about. Exactly, yeah, you have a strategy how to do it, and then of course you have to adapt, because the car can oversteer, the car can understeer, and whatever happens first, you have to adapt to it. So yeah, that's how it works.
Thank you very much. A question back here in the middle.
To John, my name's Hank from Georgia, by the way. Question, technology is constantly changing on these cars. How difficult is it for the race car driver, especially if they jump from one series to another and staying ahead of that technology?
It's bad enough for the commentator to remember which one's which, to be honest. I think Renger will jump in on this as well, but it's like jumping from a left-hand drive car to a right-hand drive car, from a stick to an automatic, from paddle shift back to stick. It's something that you just have to get used to. The best drivers do it relatively simply. Sometimes it's like jumping out of a car and onto a motorbike. It is that different, particularly when you're jumping out of a GT car that's 1,300 kilos, or 3,000 pound car, and then you're jumping into a prototype which is probably 2/3 of the weight. And having had the very great pleasure to have driven some race cars in my time, sometimes not in race situations, so without the pressure of having to deal with the cars on the track, even just doing a test day, I'm not a driver. I'm a talker, and you know that it's difficult to do. Sorry? No? Okay. But Renger will tell you, you know, if you jump from a GT car into a prototype, just the difference between downforce levels. Never mind things like traction control, ABS, and you have GT cars now that look very similar. A GT3 car will have traction control and ABS. A GTE car has only traction control, no ABS. Some forms of GT car, like GT in Daytona in Rolex, that has no traction control and no bit. You know, so the cars look very similar from the outside, but the driving experience, Renger, is very, very different indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm racing GT3 cars in Europe. It's a Mercedes-Benz SLS. It's a GT3 spec, and it's a lot of weight compared to what I'm racing here. And it's like you say, you jump in. It's a steering wheel with 4 wheels. And this one is a steering wheel with 4 wheels as well. You just have to get it around the corner as fast as you can. And I think it's really that simple at one point. Of course you have to change your driving style a little bit. You have to brake a bit earlier with a heavy car. But still it's on the limit. It doesn't matter if you're in a touring car or in a Formula 1 car. There's a point where you have to brake to make the corner as perfect as you can. And there's a point where you go to throttle to accelerate out as soon as you can. So braking as late as possible, earliest possible throttle. That's what you have to do with each car, and then adapt to what the drivability of the car is like.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us here this afternoon. More of you come in all the time. We've also got more guests arriving as well. We've got, first of all, the COO of IMSA, the technical director of the ALMS, Mr. Scott Elkins. Thank you, Scott. We're also got the driver's audience as well. A winner 2 weeks ago in the GTC class, Damien Faulkner. Here are Damien. And in the red and white shirts, Townsend Bell, who drives number 23. Yes, we are Ferrari this afternoon. I think just leading on from that question, the last question about adapting to different cars, let's go to Townsend Bell and ask Townsend, you've driven this year the Ferrari, you've driven the Indianapolis 500. That's two pretty distinct, different types of race cars there. How difficult is it to adapt from an open wheel car to something like the Ferrari?
There we go. I was going to say, you left off X Games in Munich and Stadium Super Trucks in Toronto. So I've had the full gamut this year. It's been a blast, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Adapting from one car to the other, I think, can be a challenge, but it's easier for me because I've done multiple disciplines this year, but on different weekends. Except for broadcasting and racing in the same weekend, which I've done a couple of times. But I think it's more difficult for somebody like Lee Keane, who is our teammate, third driver with West AJR in the Ferrari, who at Road America had to go from the Grand Am Ferrari spec on Continental tires to the ALMS Ferrari GT, essentially GT2 spec on Yokohama tires, back and forth, back and forth. That's really, really hard to do. Some guys do it in Indy Lights and IndyCar occasionally on the same race weekend. So adapting to different cars, as long as you have some time in those cars, it feels like slipping on an old glove and it comes back to you very quickly. Jumping into Robbie Gordon's trucks with 3 laps of practice at Toronto, that didn't come to me very quickly.
How was the jump?
Oh, it was insane. Steel ramps, 36-inch high steel ramps around a street circuit with a 600 horsepower off-road truck. No fun at all. It felt like 10 guys that had just robbed a bank and we were running from the cops.
It probably was. Another guest this afternoon is Damien Faulkner here on your extreme right. Damien, thanks for joining us this afternoon. You're driving number 66 TRG Porsche, and you're coming off a win last time out with Ben Keating at Circuit of the Americas. Damien, how big was that win for you?
Thanks, Jeremy. It's great to be here. It was huge, Jeremy, because obviously we've had a very tough season. Where's he gone?
I'm out of here.
I think there's something funny with this mic. Yeah, so we've had a very challenging season, I would say, this season. We haven't had the best of good fortune, so to get a win was fantastic because there's only, now 2 rounds left in the championship, and you go into a mode of sort of saving your career and wanting to find a drive for next season. Obviously we're not in the championship hunt, unfortunately, and the best result before that was a 3rd place. So all credit to TRG. They've been a fantastic team. They've worked really, really hard. They've never given up, and we were able to turn things around. My teammate Ben Keating is from Texas, so it was great, very fitting for us to win there in his hometown.
Thanks, David Faulkner. Now, our final guest this afternoon is from IMSA, and another question we all want to ask, as all the teams want to ask, and credit to Scott for being here, is
I don't know what the rules are.
how are the technical regulations coming along, Scott?
I don't know.
But it's a hard task you had to go here, but everything is looking really good for next year. The classes are, the structures of these are in place. It's just down to the details now.
Yeah, and the majority of the rules are actually done for most of the classes. GTLM, which is the ALMS GT cars that you'll see here this weekend, that's fixed. There's nothing changing about that. The PC class, again, the cars you'll see this weekend, those classes are fixed. There's nothing changing there. It's the GTD class, which is the new class for next year, which incorporates the GTC cars that are here and the Rolex GT cars from the Grand Am series. That's much more minor, the work we need to do there. We've got that pretty well established. We know what the cars are going to be and how those rules are going to go. The biggest work is combining apples and oranges and trying to come up with a fruit salad with the Daytona prototypes and the P2 cars. That's been the biggest challenge and the biggest amount of work.
Can I ask a question of you?
I thought this was a fan forum.
And I'm not a fan? I'm a fan with a microphone.
Yeah.
Your worst nightmare.
I know.
Within the classes, as you've described, great. How about balancing all of the classes to the front of the field? Is there still work to be done for that? And I ask because, and you'll have seen this at the weekend, at Ricard, in the E11 finale, the fastest car in a straight line was a GTC car by a considerable amount. And but bear in mind the GTEs over there run a larger restrictor. So you've got double the workload here because you've got to balance the cars within the categories and then the classes themselves.
That work's always existed though.
Yes.
And you know that. And so the idea, and this is getting way too technical and I'm sorry, but he brought it up. The GTC cars in the LMS are GT3 cars, not like what we have here in GTC. So the gap that we have in the American Le Mans series is we have the GT cars and then the GTC cars, and there's a gap there that works very, very well. The GTC cars are close to being the same on straight line speed, but not quite there. I'm sure drivers will disagree with me, but whatever, they always do. And so the goal for next year is to make the GTD class a similar performance level as what we have now with GTC, to keep that gap correct, and then everything else kind of works itself through. So that's the idea. So that wasn't bad at all, thanks.
Who here thinks the class structures work just fine now? Yes, great, thank you very much indeed. Question here from the floor.
Hi, my name is Mike. This is my sidekick Benjamin here. We're local, so first of all, very excited that the series will be back here next year. Connie, thank you for all you've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my question is, how will the race look different to fans next year? I've heard some discussion with the larger field and the available pit space, and maybe broken up into 2 races. But your thoughts, comments on how this is going to look different to the fans?
That's a good question. I think we'll all learn that together. I think we'll have a very full paddock. We love the way ALMS and Brandon before them have laid out the paddock, so we expect the combined paddock next year to be very full, very open to the fans. We're going to be running the GT classes here as the main feature race, so it will be the only race in the series next year where GT will take the overall win. So I think that's very exciting, and I hope that brings out more auto manufacturer support for that race, so that can be exciting with the big display vehicles and such. And then we'll also run a TC as the second race, so it's one of the best of all worlds in our opinion. We're just thrilled to have been chosen.
Fantastic, Connie, thank you very much. One right here.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm also from Georgia. I always like to get a little behind the scenes and from a personal perspective. Any one of y'all can answer this. Why racing? Why not teaching or baking or candlestick making? I mean, why? How and why did you get into racing?
Mine is easy. I can't do any of those other things, and I can't do racing very well either. So that's why I ended up talking about it. I think it's just, if you're interested in cars and automotive things, then ultimately, if it doesn't matter if it's a jet ski or a motorbike or whatever, if you do something, then you want to see it done at the very highest level. And I've been really fortunate to see all of these people along here who do their jobs at the highest level, whether it's Connie and the track promoters, Scott and the guys who do all the organising, and trust me, these guys have got the worst job in the world, and all the drivers. For me to be as close to that as I am, with the very limited driving talent that I ever showed, and even less in terms of financial backing, really that was something that I could have only dreamed about 15 years ago when I first came over here. And to have done that and to have been part of it is just been like a dream come true, really. It's the ultimate fan experience, quite honestly.
Connie, same question.
Well, I got into this sort of by accident. I grew up in Martinsville. My former partner, Harvey Siegel, put VIR under contract and then said, now what? So we were introduced by a mutual friend, and I wanted to move back home from New York, and so I am a real estate developer by heart and by trade, and it just happened to be around a racetrack. So I had never been to a racetrack in my life before starting VIR, And now I've been a whole bunch of them. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've got the best job on the planet. I get goosebumps just talking about it. The fans are awesome. The teams, the drivers, the technology development through the engineering. Everyone who comes here because they chose to. No one comes here because they have to. And I think that's amazing. And we get to play host to all we are. So thank you. This is the greatest job on the planet.
Townsend?
It helps with the... Is that you? I was going to ask if my wife emailed that question to you to ask, why racing? Because I've been hearing that for 12 years now. But, I went to the Indy 500 when I was 10 years old, and I'm from California, so it was a big deal to fly out with Dad for the biggest race in the world, and I can still remember the feeling of sitting there in the grandstands for the start of the Indianapolis 500 and just being floored with adrenaline and shock and awe and all of that, and that experience has stayed with me, for the rest of my life, hopefully, and certainly for the last 25 years, and so that's what that keeps us coming back. Like Connie said, you just love it, and you can't stand to be away from it, and you need it, whether you're a fan or a driver, or even Mr. Elkins at the end there. As tough as his job is right now, there's plenty of other things he could be doing, but we all absolutely love it, and we're here voluntarily. And at the end of the day, I told my wife, I'm actually pretty good at it, and every time I've tried to do something else, I took a couple years off. I was not as good at that, and started to run out of money, and thought, well, I better get back in a race car, because that's how I know how to make a living, is at the racetrack, and it's born out of passion. We're all fueled by desire up here, and there's nothing better than that.
Good question. Mr. Elkins, same question for you. An accomplished engineer. How did you, well, not how, but why did you end up in racing?
I'm a rat like Townsend. I actually grew up in Indiana, about 60 miles from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and went there 12 years old with my dad, and had no idea that you could do it for a living. I thought it was something that was interesting, and like everybody else sitting here, I was a massive race fan. I begged and pleaded every chance I could to go to the Speedway and go to the 500, and like a lot of other people, I didn't have any money. So the only way to do it was, I went to school and became an engineer, knowing darn well that I couldn't drive, and I never even thought I could. But the greatest part about it is that I literally wake up every day, and I'm excited about going to work. Because, as I always say, I say it a lot to a lot of people, this beats the heck out of a real job. I mean, I get to come to the racetrack and get paid to do it. So it's pretty amazing, and even my worst day is usually a pretty good day. So it's an amazing thing, and Townsend's completely right. You don't come and do this without passion for it. And I think deep down everybody that's involved in racing, no matter what kind of shirt you have on and what kind of credential you have, you're a race fan, because you don't give up your life to do this without loving it. And you do give up your life, but I'll do it again all day long.
Yeah, I'm into that. I think that's why we're all here as well, isn't it? Another question here.
Connie, this question is for you. I think not everyone knows that the track hunter actually races also, and I know you had your car out the other week doing some vintage racing. How'd you finish?
I did not ask him to do that. I raced a Datsun 510 1972 vintage car. I got a black car in the race, so I was bummed out. But I just got a new motor, and I'll be out for club day next week, so hopefully I'll find my time back.
Love it. Passion again. Fantastic.
Kind of one more question for you. So, over the past couple of years, we started seeing changes to the track. You're bringing new curving in and different changes like that. Looking forward, what are you thinking about here? I'll throw out a couple of things. Is there any repaving plans in the future?
Oak Tree.
Oak Tree. What are we doing with Oak Tree? More paving in the paddock.
He's put me on the spot before we have our press release tomorrow.
Uh-oh.
But for the fans who came to Fan Forum, we're going to pave the paddock. Yay!
Yeah, paving the paddock.
We affectionately call it the beach. We sometimes call it other things as well, especially after a big rain. But we're going to pave the paddock. We are also planning to repave the historic full course. There will be select widening on the full course. So that's really awesome, and then we'll finish the curving work after the paving work. As far as Oak Tree goes, anyone who bought an advance ticket to this event, our first Oak Tree Grand Prix, will get a memento. Oak Tree is I guess a burnt piece, but we're going to keep making more and more of those because the demand has exceeded the supply we can create in a short amount of time. The Oak Tree itself is in Richmond being processed for large slabs for tabletops or wall hangings, smaller pieces for plaques, squares for gear shift knobs. So we'll be making those available to fans for sale, and then I'd like the fans who create things to bring them back to the next Oak Tree Grand Prix to show everybody what they did. And lastly, we're having it cloned. So the cloning is going very well, and we should have those at a size that will make sense in about a year. So every little bit of Oak Tree is being used because Oak Tree has lots of fans and lovers. So.
Fantastic. God, I love it. Dream up a couple more questions here. In the meantime, well, yeah, we've got one over there at the moment. For Ranger van der Zender and David Farmer, particularly, if you guys haven't been involved last couple of questions. You both started off your careers in open wheel racing. What's it like now to transition into sports cars where you've got to share your car with somebody else?
So the main difference between this Formula car and a sports car, that's the question, right?
No, what's it like having to actually have somebody else drive your car?
Is it still working? Yeah. To be in the same car with a teammate, is that the question?
Yes.
Still working? Yeah. Okay. No, I think the main difference is that normally if you don't do so well, you really have to get back to yourself and say, what did I do? What did I do well? And now I think together with a teammate, you really start working together. So if he's a little bit slower, you better coach him and give him track time during practice to get him up to speed, to get the end result on the Sunday or the Saturday. So before it was just focus on me. The team was around me alone, and I had to work on getting better. And now I think together with a teammate, the cooperation is making the difference instead of working on yourself. So that's the main thing.
For David?
The same question?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I suppose like many of these guys, I've had the first half of my career was spent in open wheelers, or what I would call single seaters, which culminated in Indy Lights. Actually, in 2001, was a teammate to this great man sitting beside me, so we've known each other for a long time. And then in 2003, I got into sports cars. Actually, I did the Carrera Cup races, the championships, the Super Cup, British Carrera Cup, and then eventually found my way back to America again. But it's much more like having a sort of your family at the racetrack or something, or working with them. You've got suddenly 50% of everything, so you're sharing everything, you're sharing data, and instead of trying to beat your teammate, you're now working with your teammate. And it just brings a whole new dynamic, but it's very, very positive and very interesting, and you end up helping each other. And sometimes you can learn things as well. Obviously, we're professionals and usually we race with amateurs, but it's amazing that some of the amateurs can improve our game in certain aspects as well. Perhaps not even on the track, but elsewhere. So very, very interesting, I have to say, and really enjoying it.
There was a question on this side of the room, wasn't there? Somebody want to ask a question over here? Yes? Who was it? No? Yes? I'm Robert, this is Virginia. Glad you're here. Love this place. Oh, for the drivers. I run a track like this. How much can you actually see other than the road?
I can give an answer on that. I did a few laps yesterday, and the first time I came, I didn't see anything. So I saw the road going up the hills, and I think most of the corners are blind. For me, they were. I don't know for you guys, but most of the corners were blind, and I think it's a very challenging track because of that. I've been to Motorsport this year for the first time in Canada. This was a track where I was really amazed. And yesterday, my first lap around this track, I didn't see anything of the corner coming up. I just knew from the track work what was coming up. So going up the hill flat out in 5th gear, and then thinking there should be something there, what should be possible, a small lift, and going up there and getting through the corner, it's quite a challenge, and you don't see a lot from it, so you have to trust on what you know.
You don't really see a lot, to be honest. which is probably a good thing, isn't it? But, I mean, at VIR here, because it's so undulating, you can see all of the S's in front of you, but typically racing cars are low, very low to the ground, very close to the ground, and typically the driver is bolted in at the lowest possible position, so you do not tend to see a lot. And so here you see more than most, because there's a lot of it uphill. Of course, then you don't see anything coming back down the hill. And then there's a bit on the back straight that I call the end of the world, because it just, you're in fifth gear or sixth gear. How many gears do we have? Six gear? And you're flat out and you just go over it. But you know, fortunately, there's still quite a bit of straight racetrack over the end of the world. But it's really, really challenging. This track is fantastic because, not just because it undulates, because it has a mixture of everything: slow corners, fast corners, you know, off cambers, cambered corners, got everything really. And I think it's a fabulous facility. We had a great time here last year. I'm so happy that Connie was able to convince Scott Texan. And yeah, just so happy that we're coming back. All I have to do now is find a drive and make sure I'm here next year.
I was just going to say, I've had the good fortune of destroying a lot of race cars in my career, and one of the things I love about VIR is when you go off here, it is remarkably smooth in the grass, especially the left-hander after the S's. You do that in mid-Ohio, and there's a good chance the car is gone. And here, it's wonderfully smooth. It's really well done, because I'm puckered up and nothing happens. It's just like sailing through a nice smooth football field. So love it here.
Yeah, I'm a race fan of every kind of racing, and I really do appreciate you guys for putting on a terrific show here. Connie, a question for you, and I don't know if you can answer it, but American Motorcycle Racing, AMA, any chance of bringing it back here? Because it was wonderful when it was here.
We would love to have it back. We've invited them to come and do a track inspection to see the new curving, because that will impact the riders differently than the drivers. But we would very much like to entertain having them back. Lock them, tell them to come.
Scott, you were in France this week, is that right? For more meetings with the ACL. I think you put up a tweet the other day. That's probably what you were doing then, is tweeting, I guess. Tell us a little bit about that tweet and you know, how productive that trip was to France.
I was actually in France yesterday and came in last night. And I was texting Kerrigan, who was the manager of the track. He was asking me a question, and it was very important that I respond to him. So I get Connie's permission. That's why I was texting. Yeah. Yeah, what's going on with that? I was at a meeting at the FIA, and what we're talking about is a thing called GT convergence, which means trying to come up with some new regulations for GT cars starting in 2016. The GT cars that we have now are primarily lined up in the cars that we see in ALMS this weekend. They're called GTE cars. And then there's another set of cars that don't typically race here in the States that much, but will race in the GTD class next year, called GT3 cars. And it's a group of manufacturers. There's probably about 45 or 46 of us in the room working on the regulations to determine the two different classes of cars. And they've come up with a term. They're going to be called GT and GT Plus. It's a very European way of thinking about things, something this and plus. And we'll define those. The GT cars will be essentially what they call customer cars, which means that kind of the pro-am type of driver, they'll drive those cars. And then the GT Plus will be like the factory cars that you see here that the ALMS are running this weekend in the GT class. So we made some huge gains yesterday. It was about a 7-hour meeting. And worked through a lot of the things. We worked through mostly engine stuff and some of the chassis things yesterday. But it's really moving forward. It's really going well. The target is to hopefully be able to introduce some regulations next June at Le Mans. So I think this was the 5th or 6th meeting we've had on this topic within the last year or so.
Scott, is it the thought that both of those categories of cars will race at Le Mans?
Yeah, the idea is that it'll basically replace the two categories that exist now. So you've got, at Le Mans, you've got GTE and then GTE AM.
Yeah.
And the idea is that this worldwide category will, the GT car when you talk about GT and GT Plus, and I'm sorry this is so confusing. There's too many letters and it's ridiculous, and believe me, I get lost too, so we're going to work on clearing that up. But the GT car will replace the GT3, GT Plus will replace that, and yes, those two categories. And the same for us. We'll ideally adopt those two categories as well, so the cars that people race in America are the same cars that everybody races in Europe and worldwide and at Le Mans, and it gives all of our guys a good opportunity to have a chance to go race back and forth. So, and the manufacturers love it because they only have to build one car for the world, and it just improves GT racing all over. So it's a really cool project to be a part of.
Yeah, great.